when I got to college, at the end of the sophomore year, we had to make a decision about what our major would be. And so I was torn between Latin and chemistry. But my uncle told me that when he was at that point in his life, he wanted to be a zoologist. And his father had said, choose something that you can make a living at and do zoology on your free time. And that made sense to me. So I said, okay, I'll major in chemistry and do Latin on my free time. In 1944, some recruiter from Armstrong came to Randolph-Macon. A friend of mine in chemistry had worked at Armstrong the summer before. So she said, why don't you go talk to the guy from Armstrong? So I did, and he told me about Armstrong and the fact that they had big plans for a lab and everything. And I thought that would be nice. He was also interested in offering a summer job. So they offered a summer job. And I went in the summer of 1944 and worked in the paint section of the laboratory. I really loved Lancaster. You know, Lancaster is just one of those ideal places to live. So I thought, that's where I want to go. When I came to Lancaster, then in July of 1945, I was assigned to the floor division section. It was at the time when plastic flooring was coming on the market, and they were still in the process of being able to produce it in the factory. What I was doing was actually experimenting, making something that would end up, being on the market. But that was an interesting thing, to be the only woman in the factory with all these guys around. The thing was that John Rampulo told one of the guys that knew me, said, tell Edith to go down to the Army and Navy store and get some jeans and a work shirt, and not to wear those fancy skirts and sweaters to work in up at the factory. And I thought that was a fairly decent thing to do, so that's what I did. I only worked there a year because I met someone and I got married, and then I never worked there again. I was married for 67 years when my husband died, and we have 3 children, and I have 7 grandchildren and 6 great-grandchildren, with another one on the way in May, I think it is. It was a very short-lived career for only one, but the thing about majoring in something like chemistry is that things that I had learned there, doing that, carried over into running a household.
Sure.
I don't know what I would have done, really, how I could have managed that job with 3 children, like some people are doing today. My dad never really knew his father, who was killed when my dad was 2 years old. So he was literally raised by his mother and an older sister. And I don't know whether that influenced his attitude or whatever, but anyway, he is a father of 3 girls. He never, as I recollect, never told us that there was something we couldn't do because we were girls. And he had a workshop in the basement, and if we wanted to use any of his tools, we were allowed to go down there as long as we put them back at the place where they belonged, and that sort of thing. In fact, one Christmas, all I wanted for Christmas was a football, and I went down Christmas morning, and there it was. And nobody ever said, "And why do you want that?"
So I hear you're in a group that records people's stories, kind of like what we do. Is that what you do here?
Well, you do it with film, right?
Yeah. But do you like to capture people's stories?
It's called life stories. Mm-hmm. You write something that you can read to the rest of the group in about 5 minutes, so they're not very long. I started with it in 2010, right when I came to Homestead, because I knew somebody here at Homestead who was in the group, and he said, "Oh, I think you'd really enjoy that." So I said, "Well, what do you have to do?" He said, "Well, I would suggest you come and just see what we do, and then you can decide." So I went, and he was there and read his story. And that was the only time he ever came. But he was a family doctor, and so he knew me, and it was a good suggestion. I'm highly motivated to do it because all of my grandchildren live all over the world. Westerners sort of look down their noses at people who are Eastern, and I figured there's a heritage here that these guys will never know, so I will let them know. The 4 years that I was in college were all war years. It was chaotic, and there were times where I thought, why am I staying here doing this, and not. But I did. I knitted for the Red Cross. I have a very large and varied family, and I stay in touch with them. And I am actually the matriarch of a very large family. Yeah. In my mother's family. I'm the oldest living member of that family. Oh, yeah. I was active in the League of Women Voters. I was their treasurer for 6 years and the auditor of their books for the next 6 years. And I had 2 terms as a trustee at First Presbyterian Church. The president of the board knew that I had been to Randolph-Macon, or graduated, and he had a daughter at Randolph-Macon. And he assumed that because I was a graduate of Randolph-Macon, that I would be the secretary of the trustees. Not so, and I disinformed him of that. I'll tell you, I did not major in English. And he said, "Oh, well, I just assumed that you would."
So you broke a lot of stereotypes.
Yeah. I was so shocked, that he would automatically assume that. And the dentist who asked me too, what I did, and he said, "Oh, my, you were well ahead of your time." Said, "I didn't think of it that way. It never occurred to me." However, I also come from a family where the women were educated, which was ahead of its time. My great-grandfather was the founding president of Clemson College, and and his 6 daughters all went to college. He believed in educating women, so we were just lucky. Yes. At the end of the sophomore year, the top 10 scholastic kids women were chosen, and so I was one of those 10. I was also 3rd in my high school graduating class too. It wasn't that I was trying to do this; I was just doing what came naturally.
Yeah.
And I've been lucky in many respects. You have to overcome your fear. My mother had grown up in Lynchburg, Virginia, and when she was 19, she went to New York to nursing school. I mean, she'd never been anywhere, and she got on the train and went to New York. And so I thought, well, if she can do it, I can do it too. If you're into new things, you can't be too afraid because it holds you back. Or when you try anything new, it doesn't work right away. You have to be forgiving of yourself.